I know we talked about it, and it's been a thing that we've been sitting on for a little bit.
Mhm.
But I want to do a variation on a thing. We talked about sitting in silence for 15 minutes, which
Mhm.
I still want to do. It's still on the list.
Yeah.
It's on the list. I think after we get like 100 people, I want to crash it immediately by doing an episode where we just sit in silence and drink coffee for 15 minutes. That's
Well,
the
we were just talking about putting people to sleep while we do our podcast. So, I mean, it sort of fits in there. I mean, we could
yeah.
also do ASMR. That's an
I
option
yeah
too.
that, yeah. I think we're the thing is I find that we're probably accidental ASMR, which I find to be a far superior version of ASMR than ASMR.
Yeah.
Like if you're doing the thing where like and now I'm gonna click my nails. That I find kind of creepy and unappealing. But
Mhm.
if you're like, and now we're going to make some stew, and I watch you quietly make stew and like and hear the ting ting ting
Yeah.
ting, that out like a light every time. I don't want like the purposefulness of ASMR on our you on the think feel listen you, it really has to be more on the feel side than the think
Yeah.
side for my
Yeah.
ASMR to really work.
Exactly. Well, yeah, and I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole because we do have a plan for today. But
This is one of those episodes where I have a plan, and then you started pressing record, and I was
and
like,
it's
"Yeah,
like,
that's a
yeah,
cool plan and everything, but have you thought about what type of ASMR you like?"
yeah. Well, the thing is, like, now I think, ASMR has sort of become popularized, and so now it's really just like, hot girls doing ASMR, which isn't really ASMR, so
I mean, yeah, I'm not. Listen, I'm not trying to take
yeah.
away hot girl ASMR,
Hmm.
but I will always prefer personally, and they
Yeah.
may be hot, they may not be hot. An 80-year-old professor talking about Renaissance art is going to get me down faster, and like quietly cleaning a Renaissance art painting is going to get me down faster than someone weirdly putting a soft toy on like a blue mic. Just
Yeah.
that's of the two. I'm always going to pick one. Wait, I'm sorry. I didn't even. I'm being so rude right now. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, Brandon.
And speaking of ASMR, the second edition of Zodiac, which we talked about so long ago that we were doing a series, and then we just talked about other stuff for a while,
Yeah.
which makes sense. You want
It's
to talk
a
about it? What do you want to start? Or you want me to start? Because you're
Yeah,
the
look.
first one. I made an image. I'll do this. I made an image at the end because I wasn't sure if we had enough images,
Mhm.
so we had an image to start with.
Exactly. And that image was yeah, well, yeah, so basically at the end of Capricorn, uh you sent me this image
Hmm.
and I said, okay, I think 30 was enough. And so
Well,
and
that was what
so
we agreed to at first too.
yeah.
We agreed to
And
30 minutes
so
of music and 30 minutes of 30 images. So
exactly, yeah. And so I held on to this for a couple months while we were getting Capricorn um prepared, and that actually turned out to be pretty nice because I had those couple months, and not that I was um really thinking about it all the time, but it was in the back of my head, and then when we came back to it to start, we had this really nice link from Capricorn over into Leo, and we did the same thing going into Pisces as well.
hmm
So yeah, it was really cool because I think that it sort of provided that bridge that I think we needed for Zodiac.
hmm so in my mind, this bust was the image at it's the close up of there's a bust at the end of Capricorn that
Hmm.
it's sort of a busty thing. It's a bust staring at a door that says dead, and there's a window in the back, and that's what that last image of of Capricorn is.
Hmm.
So I was like, well, at that point in Zodiac, sort of, and especially Capricorn, had gotten kind of so weirdly dark,
Hmm.
and I don't know, maybe now it's not as obvious, but going through it, it felt so noiry, dark, kind of unpleasant that I wanted to tell a different story.
Hmm.
So my idea was there's a camera that occasionally, not always, lives in my head while we work on Zodiacs, which is like it will show an image and then it will sort of zoom in, and that will be a zoomed in image of what what was that image before.
Hmm.
So this bust was the zoomed in image, And so much so that like I had this idea that you would zoom in on the bus and go, well, that was one story in the Zodiac. Let's tell another one. Like I was
Mhm.
so done with Capricorn that like the idea was this is a narrator character. It's not the detective. It's not
Yeah.
the guy talking. It's not the aliens. It's a completely different character talking.
Well, yeah, and Leo ended up being as I was listening to it again, this past week or two, what I noticed is that it almost sort of became the opposite, I think, of Capricorn, because Capricorn I felt was sort of dark on the outside. In the middle, it got a little bit lighter. This one was sort of the opposite because it was had that generally a little bit lighter, but in the middle it got dark, and but then at the end, kind of got lighter again. So.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and for me, like for both Capricorn and Leo, I was still mostly reacting to what you sent.
Mm-hmm.
Which when we get to Pisces, we can talk about how that changed, but it was very much image by image for me, looking at kind of what you were doing, and I was sort of responding to your images. Uh, and then I don't know how that affected I'm actually that's actually something I wanted to ask about Capricorn as well, but because I think with both of those, like for me, it was such a reactive, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and so I'm curious like how you perceived the music, as you created the images.
A lot of time, well, the thing is, I sort of send it out and I don't think about what I just sent out anymore.
Mhm.
Like it's out, it's gone. And then when I get the music back, I don't, this is almost embarrassing to admit, I don't know which song will go with which image once it goes up,
Mhm.
because there's a disconnect with which song goes to which image, because you make a song and then I react to that song, but then
Yeah.
that song goes to the image before it,
Well,
right?
that's what I was kind of thinking as well, because especially with these two, with Capricorn and Leo, it's the way we present it, on YouTube is that it's image with the music, but really it's actually a little bit more subtle than that. I mean, and if it was really reflective of our process, it would be more kind of blended, I think.
Mhm.
Which I mean might not be a bad idea actually to do that, but we've sort of set it up this way anyway.
Well, I like that that we make it, you make a thing, I make a thing, you make a thing,
Yeah,
I make a thing, and then it's a third thing comes out every time that we're not entirely in control of.
yeah, exactly.
That was always sort of a big concept for me, was there's a certain letting God take the wheel a little bit while having a lot of control elsewhere.
Mhm.
Uh, but I also like for this one, I had a lot of really, for Capricorn, it was really wherever we led, and that's sometimes true for stuff. But for Leo specifically, I had a really clear image and want that I had for this one,
Mhm.
which it was Capricorn on vacation was the
Mhm.
idea. This is the vacation episode. It's also this is the water level. There's a lot of water elements in this one
Mhm.
because Capricorn had no real water elements. And after this image, and I broke it twice, once on purpose, once because I just couldn't come up with anything. There was a rule in this one that there were no eyes.
Mhm.
Capricorn, one of the big images I went back to over and over and over again were sort of eyes, eyes, eyes,
Mhm.
eyes, eyes. Like a lot of outsider artisty, visionary artisty stuff.
Mhm.
There was a fascination with eyes. But for this, there's one example of counter that, but I would purposefully get rid of any eyes I possibly
Mhm.
could. And in my larger work, also, there's a no skull rule. There was a no skull rule. There still kind of is. Sometimes and like every time I make a rule, I'll break it eventually.
Mhm.
But there was there was a big no eye and no skull rule. So
Mhm.
I had to like work around the fact that I couldn't show any eyes or any skulls. Now for the first image, that was untrue. I could show eyes, but
Mhm.
anything after that, it kind of proved that I had to
Mhm.
make images that didn't have any eyes on.
Mhm. Um, Bad joke, but there's an eye right here. So
Yeah, well, there's eyes in front of
there's
us, tons
yeah.
of them. But I later on, so this image doesn't count. Technically, the first image of the next piece
Yeah.
is always a lingering thought from the last piece.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what I like, is that it gives it that little connection, that bridge, because it is that lingering thought, I think.
Yeah, there
Yeah,
is an interesting through line through it. But yeah, if you go to
yeah,
the very next image, I guess
yeah,
there is technically an eye, but that's a fish eye. I don't know if like it's also like stuff that's like super important
yeah,
uh shows up, stuff that's super important that I was like, oh yeah, I did this through the entire piece. I'll realize I didn't do until like 15 minutes in. 15 minutes in a
yeah,
30-minute piece, I suddenly realize this is what it's always been about, and that's why I made it. And then I'll
yeah.
realize that like, oh, I haven't done that for the most of the time.
Well, and I think that's part of what's interesting about this process to me as well, is like at the beginning, I think that we're kind of feeling out. I think we're kind of feeling out like where things are going,
Hmm.
and I feel the same way. It's not until about like the third or fourth, movement that we, or well, 10th, if you're counting both of ours, that
Hmm.
we're kind of, starting to establish actually what it is, and I
Yes.
did notice like, but I did notice what you said. It's interesting you say talking about Capricorn on vacation, because um that is immediately kind of what I picked up on, with this image. uh and and I felt like that sort of led the charge, for at least the first few images. And the music that kind of went along with it was, there was a little bit of island feel to
Hmm.
it.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
that's the other thing is if Capricorn takes place in the city,
Hmm.
um, Leo very purposefully and thoughtfully takes place elsewhere.
Hmm. Yeah.
And it takes place, and the city does exist, and it sort of re-shows up. Uh,
Hmm.
and but it's in the background for the most part. It's all
Yeah.
like over there. And what's interesting, you can go. Let's go ahead and go to that next image
Yeah.
because like you can see more water elements
Hmm.
that we're playing with here, and I really try to lighten the one of my favorite words here. Try to lighten the tone, and like the window showed up in the final
Hmm.
image, and this is the first few images, so I'm still thinking about Capricorn while I'm
Right.
making this stuff. Um, but the window shows up again. The window is one of the final images in Capricorn, so it shows up again in Leo, and in my perhaps I have made something too complex, but like in my mind, all images that are either purposefully or non-purposefully repeated are connected. Like it's
Hmm.
all like there are themes in the work that show up again and again, and they show up again and again, and you're supposed to go, oh, this was here and this was here. And I
Hmm.
don't know if anyone ever notices that or ever should notice or should care, but that through line for me
Hmm.
is what helps me like keep making stuff, is just having tiny little stories in your head that create through
Yeah.
lines is such an important thing.
Yeah. Well, and I think, I mean, we probably talked about this probably on a previous podcast, because it's something that I think about a lot. But I I think that there's always the story that, are telling, and not even us, but just, artists as we create.
Hmm.
But then when you sort of let it loose into the world, then I think that you kind of, you give that responsibility over to the viewer or the listener, I think. and
Hmm.
and so I think, I think in my mind it's okay to have different interpretations, and different levels of what people are noticing, because
Hmm.
maybe some people might notice, that window reoccurring. But if not everybody does, that's okay. And musically, like, I think, um if we were treating this kind of like a movie,
Hmm.
then there would be like a window motif that would come
Hmm.
up from in the music. And that's something that I've sort of consciously not done,
Hmm.
because I didn't want it to become like a movie. I didn't want it to
Yeah.
become. And so, when you have a window, you're not necessarily going to hear the same music that you heard before, but but in my mind, it's still connected. Even though you might not find the same musical motif, there's still a connection there with the with the music. It's just not as apparent. If that makes any sense.
Absolutely. I think that's one
Yeah.
of the things that at least for me, for Capricorn, is kind of important, is while it is a direct reaction to um And I'm sure there's always we've done this long enough that I'm sure we can always find a counterexample at this point.
Yeah.
We've now made an hour and a half worth, even just with Zodiac,
Mhm.
we've made an hour and a half worth of music. But it's not like, oh, there's a trombone sound, I'm going to show a picture of a trombone.
Right, right.
There's a lot, the reaction to it is a lot more primal, and that sort of,
Yeah.
maybe I'm misusing the word, but an esoteric sort of, you do this, I do this.
Mhm.
It's more of a feeling than a direct representation. I don't know. Let's see what else we got in Leo.
Yeah.
Yep, still underwater.
Mhm.
That's another, you can sort of see. This is one of the ones where, like, I got
Yeah.
a little distracted, and I apologize.
Well, this one, yeah, I thought this was an interesting shift,
Hmm.
from what we had before. And this is only one, two, three, four. This is only fifth image, right?
Hmm.
So it's kind of weird to say that's an interesting shift, but at this point, um, by by the time we've gotten to the fifth image, it's a couple weeks in,
Hmm.
so I think, in what takes 5 minutes to watch and listen to, for us, is more like a 3 or 4 week process, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
and
think.
so I think because of that, like I thought this was kind of an interesting shift in like how the 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 thing was going. So
I had a thing is, yet again, in a lot of Leo, especially the beginning of Leo, I'm
mhm,
really playing the opposite of Zodiac as well. Or
mhm,
excuse me, opposite of Capricorn as well.
yeah,
Because in Capricorn there was sort of a motif of a radio tower, which actually we didn't even bring up. But there was a
mhm,
motif of a radio tower that shows up a handful of times. And the radio tower clearly is a bad thing. Whatever it
mhm,
is, something bad is happening around it. And this one I wanted a more positive, like I really wanted Leo for the most part to be a more positive vibe. Like I
mhm,
wanted it to be a lot more fun
yeah,
and a lot more especially early on. I really wanted it to be a good deal more pleasant. So I
yeah,
wanted to make like a positive tower. So these were like
mhm,
positive towers, and these clearly were
gotcha,
good guy towers
yeah,
in easy terms. So like this is still early on, really playing to what playing the opposite of Capricorn. Uh, and I think until much later on, where it sort of goes onto this island, and
mhm,
the saints start showing up, because this is when our saints are introduced.
yeah,
We're really playing just the opposite, and then there's a water level thing to it.
mhm. Um, that loud timer, that went by really fast, that 15 minutes.
Yeah. Oh
But
yeah.
luckily, we're going to continue talking about it. So
Yeah.
we'll see you next week for part two,
Yeah. See you next
hopefully.
week. Yeah.